This is your captain speaking. My name is Taylor Morgan. I am a CrossFit Level 2 trainer, and I am dedicated to helping you improve your life. I created the Captain's Lifestyle because I wanted to help as many people as possible. We cover topics ranging from fitness, nutrition, recovery, mindset, and more. If you're content with settling for average, then walk the plank. But if you're ready to become the captain of your own life, welcome aboard. Welcome to part 2 of the Patrick Simon interview about nutrition. So in part 1, we covered a lot, the importance of blood tests, nutrition timing, how people can find out more about nutrition on PubMed and what to research there. So this episode, we talked a little bit about supplementing for the blood test.
Actually, I want to talk about, go back to timing of nutrition, because we're going to talk about pre-bedtime.
Okay,
nutrition.
Right. Let's cover that real quick.
Okay, so real quick, I think that for most folks who are whose goal is not to lose fat, there's 2 times to have a good insulin spike, right? The 2 good times are post-workout. We covered that in the first part of the podcast. Mm-hmm. But the second time usually is before you go to bed. So ingesting some high glycemic, or even, doesn't have to be high glycemic, but a high glycemic carbohydrate will ensure that you have an insulin spike, which is, again, going to lower your blood sugar. It's going to get you drowsy, and good sleep is wonderful because it does increase your testosterone, recovery. There's all sorts of benefits to having good sleep. But also because a carbohydrate ingestion before you sleep will also increase your serotonin production, which also helps you have better sleep. So that's one thing that I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention.
Cool. Yeah, it should be very helpful. So now let's cover a little bit about supplements, what people should be taking, mm-hmm. Some that might be overhyped, some that might be underused.
Okay. I would say that supplementation, I would start number 1, fish oil. That's if you work out, especially if you don't work out, then you really need it, right? Because inflammation is probably running rampant. You're probably eating, the typical American diet, like we said, 16 times more omega-6s, omega-3. So like you said, very valid way, very, very important way to increase your omega-3s. Fish oil is certainly a fantastic source, but also try to reduce the amount of omega-6s you're ingesting. What are we talking about?
Supplements. So real quick, he said fish oil. If you heard the first part of this podcast, I go with Lisi fish oil. If you'd like to get a bottle of that, use code TaylorM15 at Lisi.com. So right after fish oil, my recommendation would be magnesium. If you work out, you're sweating it out, and it has magnesium is important for so many functions in the body. Make sure the magnesium you're taking is not oxide. Yep. Waste of money.
Only 10% of it gets absorbed in the body.
I heard 5%.
Could be 5 to 10%. It depends on the individual, but you just look at any laxative, and that's what it is. So you might be going to the bathroom quite a bit, but it's not much of it is going to be absorbed by the body. So you definitely don't want oxide. Make sure that and unfortunately, I think the majority of magnesium, if you just go off the shelf, is going to be oxide, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Most of the magnesium supplements that I've seen are a magnesium oxide, whereas you want to tell people what they should be looking for?
Yeah, magnesium oxide is rust, so definitely don't want that. So pretty much any other kind of magnesium would be fine. Glycinate usually ends up in your muscles, but there's a number of them, but it's really, the most important thing is to avoid oxide. But the other ones all have benefits. Some of them are better if you take it before you go to sleep, because it'll make you a little bit drowsy. Some of them are more intended to go into the muscles and liver, which is, for most athletes, what's important.
I've heard a glycinate, like you said, mm-hmm. and malate are the best for athletes.
Yes, and taurinate. I think those are the main 3.
Yeah, I've heard that glycinate is also the most recommended by doctors, mm-hmm. which is, if you get recommended magnesium supplement, that's probably what they're going to give you, which is a good quality source.
That's right. Okay. The next one I think would be zinc, which also you sweat out a lot. Magnesium also has, which is important to note, has function in terms of limiting your insulin spikes. So that's important in controlling your insulin throughout the day. Zinc, I would take it at night. Make sure you don't take them at the same time if you're going to take large quantities, because the uptake system is the same. And if you take a lot of zinc, magnesium might not get absorb, or vice versa. So usually what I do is I take magnesium in the morning, and I take zinc at night. And zinc does increase testosterone production, so another reason to take it at night. I take 100 milligrams of zinc a day. I think for most athletes, between 50 and 100 is what you want. You got to be a little bit careful because you can be poisoned by zinc. I think the first sign is you get really nauseous. I'm not sure what happens after that.
So don't take the whole bottle.
Don't take the whole bottle. Absolutely not. So I think between 50 and 100 milligrams is a pretty safe bet. As far as magnesium, depending how much you work out, 1 to 3 grams is probably sufficient for most individuals. Then after that, you definitely want to do the whey after you work out, but if we're talking about supplementation, probably if for individuals looking to gain muscle mass would be leucine. So you have the 3 branched-chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, but leucine is the king here. So if you're going to take whey, but you want to add some leucine to it, it certainly increases mTOR activation, which is the primary pathway in which your body is going to produce muscle. It's going to take amino acids and actually build muscle fiber. So leucine is a fantastic way to do that, and I would recommend between 5 to all the way up to 30 grams of leucine. And it's also important to note that most individuals, the older you get, the more leucine you need for mTOR activation. That's why you see the elderly, become frail and lose muscle mass because they're really not keeping up with their protein intake. So maybe a 20-year-old can get mTOR activation with 3 grams of leucine from their whey. A 50-year-old might need 5 to 6 grams. So it's something that I've been doing is as I get older, I've been increasing my protein, especially my leucine intake, to make sure that I get good mTOR activation after I work out.
And for the whey, you're looking for an isolate, not a concentrate, correct?
Yes, that's less important, but if you have enough protein in the system, and the reason for whey is because it's very quickly absorbed.
Yeah.
So if you have, some people like to say, "Oh, chocolate milk is a good post-workout drink," and it's not true because casein is very slowly absorbed. Because milk is 70% casein, 30% whey. The 30% whey gets absorbed quickly into your body, but the casein is going to take hours, and that's just not fast enough for post-workout nutrition.
So a good analogy I've heard about whey versus casein. I heard this from Ben Bergeron. Whey is more of like a fire hose, right? It gets absorbed fast, but some of it spills out the side.
Absolutely.
Whereas casein is more of a drip, drip. And casein would be good to take before bed, correct?
That's correct, before bed. And there are studies. Again, here there's conflicting evidence, but there's at least one study that does show statistical significance for protein synthesis throughout the night if you do take casein, because it's a lot of amino acids readily available in your bloodstream for hours versus whey again. So I typically don't recommend whey unless it's post-workout nutrition. Other than that, you want to stick with proteins that last longer in your bloodstream.
You want to talk real quickly about the correct ratio between leucine, valine, and isoleucine?
Yeah, so the most efficient way for taking the most bang for your buck is a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 grams of leucine to 1 gram of isoleucine, 1 gram of valine. That is not occurring in nature. So if you look at whey, it's roughly 2 to 1-to-1, in which is what most supplements out there are. But if you can find 4-to-1-to-1, that's your best.
That's the best. Okay. What about other supplements, like creatine is a big one.
Creatine, again, some people are non-reactive to creatine. They do not get, an increase in muscle mass. They don't get stronger from it. But I'd say 70-80% of individuals will benefit from creatine supplementation. It basically hydrates the muscle, and then, because you do need water for protein synthesis, it does increase. At least studies show that you do get stronger and get muscle mass from taking creatine versus not taking it. So certainly creatine is an important supplement, and one that's been shown safe and effective throughout the years.
Are there any supplements that people might be taking that are overhyped or over marketed that might not be having as impactful benefits as they may think?
It's hard to single any of them out. I think glutamine is taken a lot, but my biggest concern with glutamine is that it's kind of expensive, and if you look at most supplements out there, there's just not enough. With glutamine, because of its recovery benefits, you want to take 5+ grams, 10, 20 grams sometimes of glutamine after post-workout for most seasoned athletes. But it's just, so if you look at the supplementation, make sure that there's enough in there, because a lot of times there's just not enough. Same thing with BCAAs, you look at those pre-workout formulas and it just doesn't seem to be enough leucine in there to make it to make a difference. Because, different from carbohydrates, when it comes to protein or amino acids, you want to take big doses, because the big doses will shift your body from catabolism to anabolism, right? So your metabolism, when you're working out, you're in catabolism, and then you eat a bunch of protein, mTOR gets activated, you go to anabolism.
So just real quickly, muscle breakdown versus muscle building.
Correct. Yeah. So catabolism, you're breaking down muscle. Anabolism, you're building muscle. So that's what composes your metabolism. So that, you do want, again, like leucine, you do at least want 4 grams in there if you're going to take a supplement. If there's not 4 grams, you're probably just wasting your money. Those 2 grams are going to really go through your body, but you're not going to get mTOR activation. You're just probably going to peeing it out. So,
you want to talk a little bit real quickly about caffeine as a performance enhancer?
Yeah, caffeine is an important performance enhancer. Of course, as everybody knows, you do build tolerance, so something needs to be, kept in mind. But 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine before you work out has shown positive results in terms of strength gains and muscle size.
Cool. All right, so let's switch roles or switch topics a little bit. You want to cover real quickly a little bit about the cholesterol myth, about why we no longer need to worry about limiting cholesterol in our diet?
Yeah, so I feel like the majority of the population, maybe the younger population, is now aware that dietary recommendations for cholesterol have been removed. The evidence shows that there's really not that much of a correlation between high cholesterol and heart disease. I would be a lot more concerned for folks out there if their good cholesterol is high enough. That's something that, and again, fish oil and good fats is really what you should be focusing on eating, and then reducing the amount of bad fats that you eat.
So stuff like eggs and game meat, right?
Yes, and eggs and game pasture raised eggs, not cage-free eggs, which really cage-free term doesn't really mean anything. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the difference between pasture-raised, free-range, and cage.
Okay, so most eggs. Birds in the U.S. are just in a cage, and then they live in a cage. They get stuffed in there, and they get fed, and they poop and lay eggs in that cage, and that's why there's a very high concentration of salmonella on the shells of the eggs that are just regular eggs. So you definitely don't want to eat those raw. So you definitely want to stay away from that. Those chickens are fed grains full of omega-6s.
Yeah.
It's just a bad deal. Unfortunately, the egg industry hasn't come up with a lot of consistency in terms of how they use the terms. So sometimes cage-free at this point, from what I understand, is pretty meaningless. Cage-free and cage, basically the same thing.
Okay.
So I would not waste my money on cage-free. If you're not gonna buy pasture-raised, which means I think at least 108 square feet per chicken of free space, and then you have to go outside, especially if there's a humane raised seal on it. That means that they do go outside, they get fresh air, they do get the chance to eat, the things that the normal chickens eat, grass, worms, whatever. But they do go back and they do have grain available to them. So one way I think you've covered before is look at most of the time, if you look at the yolk and the yolk is a nice orange, it usually means there's a high content of omega-3s. If it's very yellow, usually a high content of omega-6s. And it's the same thing. It's interesting. It's the same thing with beef. If you look at the fat on beef and it's yellow, usually means high content of omega-3s. If it's very white, then it usually means a high content of omega-6s.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So best case scenario for the chickens, you'd be raising them yourself on
absolutely
pasture, because then what they're fed. But second best scenario, so not quite gold standard, but more realistic, would be a good pasture raised with a humane stamp seal.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So if your yolks come out like fluorescent yellow, that's not a good sign.
No, not a good sign.
Okay. Last topic I think we'll cover. You want to go a little bit over the fat myth, why fat was kind of bastardized in the 90s, and why fat-free foods is not something you should be kind of going after.
Yeah, I feel like, at a certain point, because there's a correlation between, inflammation and a body type that has a high fat content. Well, because fat has a lot of calories, and because folks whose body composition is heavy on fat usually end up with heart disease and all sorts of other problems. That the idea was, well, if you consume less fat, you will be less fat because obviously you're ingesting fat, and fat has a lot of calories. Well,
fat doesn't make you fat.
Fat does not make you fat. Maybe calories in excess will make you fat eventually if you eat enough of it. But your body typically does not want to store proteins or fat as fat in your body. It usually wants to store carbohydrates as fat, because once your glycogen levels are topped off, it says, okay, great, then now I'm going to store this as fat. But if you're in a caloric deficit diet, if you're not overeating, typically speaking, the fat and proteins you eat will not be stored as fat, especially the proteins. They get burned off. But the carbohydrates are what's going to be stored as fat, and it'll cause all sorts of problems for you long term, especially now that we're aware of good fats and bad fats. Especially good fats are fine. I mean, if you're not eating processed foods, I would say most folks out there don't have to worry about fat at all. If you're just getting fat from your grass-fed meats, from your pasture-raised eggs, from your wild-caught fish, have at it. Don't have to be concerned at all about the fat content of those things.
Yeah. So let's cover a little bit about good fats versus bad fats and what you should be cooking with versus avoiding at all costs.
Yeah, so you should be avoiding all vegetable oils, in general. So sunflower, all those kinds of oils I think that we all grew up on.
Sunflower, soybean,
absolutely, especially soybean.
Yeah, vegetable oil.
Palm oil.
Yeah.
All those things are, high content of omega-6s will just wreak havoc in your body in terms of inflammation. You want to be cooking with, avocado oil, grass-fed ghee, coconut oil. Those are all, fine to cook with. You do need to take into account the temperature of each of those. So there's usually ghee and avocado oil do pretty well in high, over 400 degrees in terms of temperature, cooking temperature. Coconut oil won't go as high. So you do have to be cognizant of that.
And what about olive oil?
Olive oil is fine to put on as long as it's raw and not heated. If you heat olive oil, it changes its chemical compound. Not what you want. So olive oils are fine for salads. If you're putting it at room temperature, keep it at room temperature. Make sure you store all these fats need to be stored away from sunlight. But olive oil especially, you do not want to heat olive oil. So you can eat it as, very healthy, great fat, extra virgin oil. But as long as it's not warmed up, you don't want to warm it up.
What happens when it's heated?
It changes its chemical compound. It becomes, basically very detrimental to your body.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, you cannot find him anywhere unless you come to CrossFit Dana Point and get the nutrition coaching there.
Nope.
But that's it. We'll wrap it up there. If you'd like to know more about The Captain's Lifestyle, go ahead and head over to thecaptainslifestyle.com or follow me on Instagram at 6CaptainMorgan9. All right. That's it. Thanks for coming on, Pat.
Thanks, Taylor.
Live the Captain's Lifestyle.